Alright, this is solving quadratic equations by finding square roots. So your essential question is, what do I need to remember when taking the square root of a number? So we're just going to start with some examples. We've been working with quadratic equations, which are equations that have x squared in them. So we're going to learn how to solve these types of equations. We already solved them by factoring, but sometimes you just can't factor, so you have to solve it another way. So we're going to learn how to solve these equations by taking square roots. So if you think of this as just a regular equation and you're trying to get x by itself, we would need to make sure that we try to get x by itself, so we would have to take 5 away from both sides. Okay, after that we would be left with 3x squared equals 41 minus 5, which would be 36. So then we would need to divide both sides by 3, just like we would before, and we would get x squared equals 12. So now if I want to undo a square, then I need to take the square root of both sides. Now, here's something new that you may not have known about square roots. If I take the square root of a number, let's say I have 4. So let's say I'm taking the square root of 4. What is the square root of 4? Well, you would probably say that the square root of 4 is 2. But I would argue that it could also be negative 2, because negative 2 times negative 2 is also 4. So really, this could be 2 or it could be negative 2. So because it could be both positive 2 or negative 2, I could write my answer as plus or minus 2. That way I don't have to write it twice like that. So if I take the square root of 12, well, I know that I've been doing simplifying radicals, so can 12 be broken down? Well, if I think of my list of perfect squares, I have 1, 4, 9, 16, and so on. Okay, what is the largest perfect square that goes into 12? Well, you could break it down into 4 times 3, and then what is the square root of 4? Well, the square root of 4 is 2, but we just remembered that the square root of 4 could be positive 2 or it could be negative 2. So when you write your answers, whatever number that you take out is going to be plus or minus 2 times the square root of 3. So that would be your answer. So I could plug in positive 2 square root 3 for x, or I could plug in negative 2 times the square root of 3 for x, and it would come out the same. Because if I square it, if I square the number, it's going to turn out positive whether it's positive or negative. Let's try another one. So we have 5x squared equals 80. So if I wanted to solve this, I would divide both sides by 5, and I would end up with x squared equals 16. Well, then I would take the square root to cancel out the square, and so I would end up with x equals, and what is the square root of 16? Well, the square root of 16 would be 4, but it could also be negative 4, so I would write plus or minus 4 as my answer. Alright, so for dropped objects, if I'm working with any kind of object that's being dropped from something, there is a formula for this. You might have seen this in physics class. The formula is h equals negative 16t squared plus h naught. This is pronounced h naught, this h sub 0. And what this means is h, the original h, is the height above the ground. T is the time in seconds, and h naught is the initial height that the object is being dropped from. So here's a question for you. For a science competition, students must design a container that prevents an egg from breaking when dropped from a height of 50 feet. How long does the container take to hit the ground? So if we break down our question, if we look what we have, basically we have an initial height of 50 feet, So that's what you're going to plug in for h naught. And then it says how long does the container take to hit the ground? So what are we trying to find? We're trying to find t, because t is the time in seconds that it takes to hit the ground. So first, we're going to use our equation that we have for dropped objects. And since we want to know when it will hit the ground would be at what height? Well, the ground would be at h equals 0. So we're going to plug in 0 for h, because that would be the height above the ground. Well, the ground is 0. And then we know the initial height is 50, so h naught equals 50. So now we're just going to plug in the numbers and solve for t. So we're using our equation right here. H equals negative 16t squared plus h naught. So I know that h equals 0. And then I have negative 16t squared plus h naught, which is the initial height, which is 50. So then if I wanted to solve this equation for t, I would have to subtract 50 from both sides. And I would get negative 50 equals negative 16t squared. So then if I wanted to get t by itself, I would have to divide by negative 16. And so I can already tell that this is going to come out a decimal. And so I get 3.125 equals t squared. So to get t by itself, to undo the square, I would have to take the square root. And so I would take the square root of 3.125, which I'm going to round to the nearest hundredth, comes out to about 1.8, or if I round to the nearest tenth. So then, remember I took the square root, so it could be positive 1.8 or it could be a negative 1.8. But let's think about this logically. If I want to know how long it takes to hit the ground, I'm not going to say that it took negative 1.8 seconds to hit the ground. So since the negative solution doesn't make sense, we would just use the positive one. So it would take about 1.8 seconds for the object to hit the ground. So what you need to do is make sure you go back and answer the essential question for your summary.